Yeah, we're live. It is 7:44. Hopefully everybody's doing well. We had a good live feed earlier talking about the Tony Angelo's 5-3 versus 327. That was good stuff. And I told you I reached out to Tony, and we'll see. We'll see if he has any interest in, I don't know, talking about what went on or whatever. Um, I I'm curious on that situation. I'm just curious why the LS did what it did. I it doesn't surprise me that his 327 made 450. I think it's got a good cam in it. I don't know anything about those heads. It's got a good intake manifold on it. That's right. I think kind of where it should be. The thing that I question is was the power output of the 5.3. It should make a lot more power than it was making. I didn't understand that part of it. But tonight we want to talk about not stock exhaust manifolds, but that would be the same thing though. To the thumbnail that I have up are Shorty headers. In fact, I think that those were JBA Shorty headers flipped upside down and they were JBA Shorty headers for a truck application. So to replace the factory cast iron, cast steel, whatever they are, stock exhaust manifolds on a 4.8 or 5.3 or 6.0 truck, can you use shorty headers like that for turbo applications? As a general question, the answer to that obviously is yes, you can. We've done it many times, and lots of people have. It's interesting when I get into conversations with people about that, because those are the headers that I use. In fact, the photo that I'm showing you, the thumbnail photo, is from the original Big Bang motors, the original two. I think might have been the first three. I need to go back and look and see on the first 6-liter when I ran Chad's 6-liter, his 99 or 2000. I think it was a 99 6-liter. But what I did was we flipped the Shorty headers that we had upside down, and then basically welded up an elbow section that had provisions for the wastegate on, one on each side, and then had a flange to mount the turbo. We didn't later on. What I would do is make it so that it's a V-band, so that I could mount kind of whatever turbo we wanted on there. And then also I could orient the turbo. It just made life easier for what we were doing on the dyno, and to configure it for different kind of intake manifolds and intercooler applications and things like that. And so that all worked out very well. But the number of comments that I got about it, and the number of comments I still get about it, and questions about it, they see that and they're like, oh yeah, that exhaust manifold's holding you back. I'm like, well, we did 1,300 horsepower with it. And I would argue that there was nothing holding that back. I mean, maybe the turbos were holding it back at that point, but the exhaust manifolds were not that thing. And the reason that I bring this up is not to tell you how great JBA Shorty truck headers are for your turbo application, but to illustrate that lots of those things work really well. But what we tend to do, and other people, we as an enthusiast, is that we tend to focus on the wrong thing. So we show that, and when you look at that, when you see that Shorty header, you're like, that's a Shorty header, that's a Shorty truck header. That thing was designed to work with, basically stock or mild NA power levels, because we know that they're first of all, the people say, oh, those are restrictive compared to long tube headers. Well, maybe from a flow standpoint, maybe not, depending on what headers you picked and what the outlet of that header is. That might ultimately become a restriction if the discharge opening basically into the exhaust is 2 inch or 2 1/4 or 2 1/2 or 2 3/4 or 3 inch, whatever it is. We ran on to further illustrate this on those first two, I know the 4.8 and the 5.3 Big Bang motors. We made two of these elbows because it was a twin turbo setup coming from the JBA Shorty headers, one on each side, 276 millimeter CX racing turbos. But we made two elbows. Well, one of them was, and we just made them with stuff that we had there at West Tech. One of them was 3-inch, the other one was 2.5. So my question always is, well, okay, if that's the case, and the opening and the header is this big, one side has a 2.5, and you're talking about the header, a length of the tubing that's about this long. It has a bend in it, but that's about the length. So my question then is to them, hey, well, if one of them is a 2.5 inch and one of them is a 3-inch, is the 2.5 more of a restriction than the 3-inch? Is it even, are either one of them a restriction at all? Because then what size is the orifice going in, the flow orifice for the hot side of the turbo? What side is the flow orifice coming out of the discharge of the Shorty header? What if both of those are smaller than the pipe that's in between them? Might be that the 3-inch on one side creates an edge on the other side that would be more disruptive to flow. And then they start thinking, they're all like, oh yeah, that's you should probably fix that. I'm like, no, I shouldn't fix any of that. My point in doing all of this is that we focus on the wrong thing. You could look at that header or a truck manifold, which I would argue does equally well and keeps the heat in better, probably retains the heat. And for 90 or 95% of the people, the kind of power that they're trying to make, none of that is a problem. None of that's a restriction at all. But we tend to focus on that when we have so many other problems that are possibly hindering our combination. The tune, the injector size, the fuel pump, maybe your fuel rails or lines or filters. Tune is a big one. You don't have ring gap. You don't have an intercooler. Your turbos are too big or too small. You don't have a turbo cam on it. The cylinder heads. There's all of these things that we get myopic about and laser focused on when that's not the issue. That exhaust manifold, that header, those JBA headers are not stopping us from making power. I mean, ultimately they will. And like with most things that could be a restriction, like a throttle body on an NA motor or on a roots blower where you're drawing in from the throttle body, eventually that could become a power problem. But when we see that sort of thing becomes more and more of a restriction as we go up and up in power. And since we're already at 1,300 horsepower, and the only thing stopping us, in my opinion, was in my opinion, it was the turbos. When we went to the S475s, then we have 2,000 horsepower with a turbo. And that's why I did that. I'm like, look, I don't want to be trying to test the strength limit of the stock bottom end on those big bang motors on the 4.8 and 5.3 and the 2.60s. I don't want to be getting near the flow limit of the turbos, the amount of power that they'll support either on the hot side or the cold side. I don't want to be getting near that simultaneously to getting near the strength limit of some component in their stock bottom end, either a piston or a rod in the case of the stock bottom end stuff. I don't want to be getting near the limit of those on either one of those. We don't care about boost response. We're not making it a turbo setup that the guy's doing for the street. Because when we did the big bang stuff, particularly when I did the 6-liter that made 1,543 horsepower, when I did that, I got that question a lot. First of all, in the other ones, I got a lot of people. I want that motor. Like, no, you don't. You don't want to use that motor. That's not going to be a good. I mean, it'd be a good street motor turned down, but not turned all the way up. And the same thing with a 6-liter, 2,000 horsepower with a turbo on something that you're only going to use 1,000 horsepower worth of it in would be a terrible combination. But they see it and they know that it worked, and so they like that. And they go, yeah, I need that. I'm like, nah, you don't. You need that, but you need smaller turbos. 2 GT45s or 2 GT3582s, something that's going to work in the power level that you're at. But again, they get focused on the wrong thing. And it's like that with the header that I'm talking about, that Shorty header. People see that and they see something that runs and it's on a small block Chevy or it's on an inline 6-cylinder or whatever. They're like, oh yeah, that stock exhaust manifold holding you back. Not very often is that the case. And I don't know when you get to that and maybe also don't get to something else, because you could get to multiple things simultaneously. But you have a tune issue, like I said. You have you have a valve float issue that you're trying to cure. You have a broken spring. You have all kinds of other things. You have a leaky head gasket. You have all kinds of other things. But man, it's definitely has to be that exhaust manifold. Just get all the exhaust to the turbo and go on about your business, be happy and all that. So we'll see what you guys got going on for Saturday night. Starter polio. Manifolds. To feed. Okay. Would you use stock manifolds or even cheap Shorty headers to feed a turbo? Or are you going all in on a full stainless header, equal length? All of that stuff. Soul, hello. I'm back again. Man of the people. Aaron, what's going on? Rich Wood, Lunchbox. Kind of off subject. Do you have a video of going carbureted on a 5.3? Yeah, there's probably 100 of them up there. Was wondering, do you happen to know where I can get more details on an engine that was on Engine Masters? The online article didn't seem to give much more information in the episode. Jacob, what motor are you talking about? Riker, what's going on? Bobby, Special Ops. The CID was holding me back. Lots of cars have Shorty headers on factory turbo setups. Yeah. And even logs and just all kinds of weird things that just have to fit. Saturday pizza. Tim, I did a pizza today. I actually had leftover Little Caesars pizza from yesterday. So it's been a double pizza day for me. Pizza on pizza action. Long tube header scavenge better. Yeah, and you think you're getting scavenging from a turbo setup? Dan, I should read the next comment before I comment. Can the exhaust be measured? Exhaust back pressure can be measured. We do that all the time. Once you get to test the Magnum under boost, try the large manifolds I sent you versus the smaller ones under boost and see if they show bigger power gains versus what you already showed. I can, but I can't do it at a really high boost level. So I could do it at 7 pounds or something to see if there's anything there. I doubt that there is going to be, but we can try it. Steve, yes. On long tube headers versus shorties or stock exhaust manifolds, definitely the way to go on an NA motor. I have lots and lots of videos up on NA stuff testing long tube headers, and long tube headers are way better because they offer scavenging, and neither one of the other two do. Look at large past and modern diesel engines with seemingly restrictive exhaust manifolds connected to turbos. Yeah, just get the exhaust to the turbo. I'd be happy. Just run a manifold or anything I would consider shorties, unless the manifold is extremely restrictive. Scrolling. Richard, is it possible that Tony's power is down simply because he said in the video he programmed the timing curve with a max of 26? Did he use an MSD ignition controller on that? Because when you use an MSD on there, there's retard in that box. So when we run stuff like a fuel injected LS with a Holly, it normally wants 29 degrees. But when we run the carbureted stuff, it wants another 2 degrees on the MSD. And I think that's because there's delay in the box. I don't think that it doesn't, the chamber didn't change. None of that changed on the motor. So I think it has something to do with what's going on in the box. And so we run more timing on the carbureted stuff when we use that. A lot of times we'll just use the Holly to run the timing and run it carbureted and just take a vacuum signal for the ECU, and just we're not providing it any fuel, but we provide the same timing curve. And so we run 29 when we do that, but we usually run 31 on the carbureted stuff with the MSD box with the ignition controller. JB headers would be great for a 454 Gen 6 if they made true long tubes. One stayed normally aspirated in 2025. Does JBA have that stuff for the Gen 6? Michael, what's going on? Don't forget to thumbs up. That's right. Everybody listens to Special Agent. Man, only a third of you are. James, long time. What's going on, man? I tried to pull my cast gear. Wouldn't move then. A cast gear for what? On the distributor? It's not about how much power you have. It's about how much power you apply. Spinning ain't winning. Yeah, but in our conversation about the LS motor, it's about power because it should have made more. Too bad I missed your live about Tony's 5.3 and 3 versus 327. Yeah, it's good. It was a good conversation. Lucky even chimed in there. I'm sure somebody informed him that we were talking about Tony, so he probably had Tony's back or something. I don't know. Lucky's a good guy. I like Lucky. The 8,000 RPM 327 small block Chevy. I'll look and see. I wasn't there when they were running that. Was it an 8,000 RPM 327 LS or a 327 small block Chevy? Oh, small block Chevy. Okay. Yeah, I wasn't there when they did that. Still going to use factory manifolds on my Camaro. That's good. I had pizza. You're not feeling good, Green Bass? Riker. Oh, you had 2 pins? I've seen some like that. Long sleeve cast distributor gear would budge with the gear puller. Turbo Trailblazer S is running again. Again and again and again and again. Is it working well? Is it not? Is it cooperating now? James, I don't know what you mean by thoughts, but I have one that I built and ran on the dyno. I ordered my exhaust and decided to go bigger setup. Now the 3-inch I got needs to be 4 inch to support 1,000 horsepower. Yeah, when you're doing turbo stuff, you have to think about that. Same thing with injectors, which we have up at richardholderperformance.com. We have injectors. I think they might still be on sale. But the things like injectors, fuel pump, in your case, exhaust after the turbo is definitely a consideration for higher power levels. I'm scrolling. Shadow Ops. I don't know what you mean by the shockwave is reduced in long tubes due to collector being remote and not local. What shockwave are you talking about? Just put a 180 after the Y pipe and go back into the engine bay and then mount turbo. It does. Remote turbos work fine. I thought the MSD was holding it back. Will a Dash 8AN be enough for fuel line return for 1,000 horsepower and 85? Yes. There was a company making 3-inch cast iron small block Chevy exhaust manifolds. Do you mean 3-inch exit for those? Falcon Run stock manifolds. I was shocked when Billy talked about it. JBA makes nice looking stainless steel headers for the 454 Gen 6 pickups. Not a good value. Ooh, $900. Yeah, that's not cheap. Aren't there any cheap ones? Yeah, Lucky is cooler than a fan. my fan's not even working. It doesn't talk much. It doesn't even say good things. Cleaning the throttle body did help with a cold start. Not stall immediately. Hopefully get emissions done. Registered. That 5.3 combo could have made closer to 500 with the Trailblazer SS. If you're talking about Tony's, I don't think it would be close to 500. I don't think it didn't have anywhere nearly enough camshaft for that. But it should have been way more than 433 though. I got you, and thank you. Would a 2-bolt main small block Chevy be reliable with 8,000 RPM and 550 horsepower? Should I try and find a 4-bolt? A 4-bolt would be better, but reliable and 8,000, like what are you doing with the motor? Like, reliable and 8,000 RPM are not two things that go together on a small block. 1,200, 120 cc injectors. Well, 120 pound injectors or 1,200 cc's, if you miss a zero there, would be enough. Yeah. A shock wave is created in exhaust system. It can be. Are you talking about reflective waves? Because that happens in exhaust manifolds. And there are also pressure pulses that happen too. I just I haven't seen any of the technical terms referred to as a shock wave. There are actually many different pressure waves and scavenging waves that happen in a properly designed long tube header and exhaust system. And there's a lot of them that overlap. It's really interesting. Saw a company making cast stainless steel exhaust manifolds for turbo, with part of the purpose being to retain heat and keep runners short, therefore increasing efficiency. Seems legit. Okay. Tony did use a 6014 MSD ignition. So that would mean that I had it programmed at 26. We'd only have like 22 actual timing. No, it wouldn't mean that at all. What it would mean is that the motor probably would have run best. If they had 26 in it, it would have run best with 31 in it. So he was maybe 5 degrees away. When you start getting up closer to the total timing that it wants, the gain that you get from 15 to 20 is a lot. The amount that you get from 20 to 25 is less than that. And then the amount that you get from 25 to 30 is even less than that. So as you go up in timing, the gain that you get is less and less, until you don't get any gain in timing. And then, then you get losses, and then you get piston parts. Get to put turbos plural in place of mufflers on the late model Mustang. Okay. I think a lot of turbo manifolds crack because the flange expands at a rate that's different than the tubes due to the thickness and proximity to the heat. Seems a cast manifold might be better. Yeah, if you read Corky's deal, he even recommends that you, because of the growth rate, that you actually cut the mounting flange to give room for growth, so that it doesn't distort the flange, which when we have that bending all the time. And then you get different growth rates in the turbo manifold or the header, because different parts of it get different amounts of heat, like right at a turn and stuff, and on the outside of the wall versus the inside of the wall. When you run them and you turn the lights off, you can really see that. You can really see and you can also see it as the turbo heats up. Certain spots get hot sooner, and so the other ones are colder. It's it's 1,300 degrees versus 1,250 or whatever. They're both really hot, but one of them is definitely hotter. One second or one part of it is definitely hotter than the other. TVSS is running. Had a couple of issues. LS3 was installed with a bad melling oil pump. Wouldn't make pressure. Uh-oh. Headmans for GM 400, 454. Look like long tubes, painted mild steel. Pretty small engine, 3/4. Yeah, we put small headers on the on our truck, on our big block. Because I was going to get all that low speed torque. That didn't work. The bigger headers work better everywhere. Was looking to try and recreate that engine. It would be a fun car that I could beat on. Love the sound of a higher RPM around dirt tracks and all that engine from Engine Masters. I can look into it and see what they did and just I don't. There's not going to be a build sheet or anything on it, but at least there would be the things that they had. The important parts. 4.7 swap was an experiment to help those pulses. The swap for the LS was not done for pulsing. The 4.7, the swap was done on the LS, at least was done to get rid of I don't know what order vibration it is on the crankshaft to make that stuff last longer. And we've tested cam swaps or firing order swaps on cams, and as long as the cam lift duration and all the valve events stayed the same, there wasn't a change in power. I need to go back and look and see when they did that. If they did it, I'm pretty sure they did it on a carbureted motor, and so I'd like to see what manifold that they had on that. Tony's 5.3, the bigger cam Trailblazer SS imported 706s would have been better and cheaper. Yeah, I mean, James, I think that we made more power than that motor did with a Truck Norris cam and a single plane manifold and the 750 on a junkyard motor, on a junkyard 5.3 with no cam in it or anything, because the EFI manifolds use like a Trailblazer SS usually make more than the carbureted manifolds do. But if they ran a carbureted manifold, but I've run lots and lots of those. So that's why I'm saying I don't, and the Truck Norris cam's a 212 cam. So it's a lot smaller than what they had. And the guys from Tick, they do good stuff. So the cam a 220 cam should make more power. And if those heads are better than stock heads, there should have been something there. Have you used Holly Easy EFI setup? I thought that was a fast. On a Honda B18C, turbo engine, kind of get away with forged rods, pistons, and ring gap to get 400 horsepower, or should I sleeve the block? Yeah, the stock block will do that. 4.7 swap allegedly helps the vibration and engine reliability. Yeah, I thought that's why they did it for the LS. I got max speed and retrofit roller lifters. I'm questioning whether I should use them. Lots of tolerances in the link bar. I don't have any experience with those. Ron, you got stock manifolds on your single S476 Borg Warner turbo. Stock 78mm throttle body. All that's fine. Plug changes are easy. That's the thing that I love about the stock running the stock exhaust manifolds like I do. Particularly, we do it as twins too, but as a single, the Y pipe is up front. We just mount the turbo. All the wires go on like they do stock, and I always use wrecking yard wires anyways. Sometimes I have a set of those ceramic ones, which are cool, fancy. I didn't buy those; somebody supplied them. No burn plug wires. Ran 860s at 158. Nice. That's got to be I would think that's be about all of that turbo, right? I think that he kept the LS a little soft for his dad. We liked it on Claimer engines because the trash would claim an engine. Couldn't get it to run right. Nice. Oh, when you had 4.7 swap cams? Yeah, we've gone through that before too. When we go to start the motor up, we're like, yeah, it's not running on all the cylinders. We're like, and then Brule would go, Richard, you didn't get the firing order right. I'm like, no, the firing order is right if it's a Chevy, because I know how to do that and go in order. He's like, oh, that's right. This is a 4.7 swap. I'm like, well, I didn't get that part right because I didn't know about that. You got a M275 HP on there and an 80-pound Coppola spring. Man, you should have all the oil pressure. Difference between a Dorman LS2 and an LS6 intake manifold, different part numbers. They are different. Dorman makes both of those, and then obviously GM makes both of those. And the Dorman LS2 makes more than the Dorman LS6 does. Have you ever run a compound turbo setup? Yes, I have. I have videos up on it, and it's, in my opinion, is not necessary on an LS for what most people are trying to achieve. But I have also run it on a 1-liter Chevy Sprint. What's the highest RPM you've taken stock LS7 lifters? I don't know on a one-run thing, but the junkyard LS that I have, that L33, has like 100 plus runs at 7,700. Do you think the A9L MAF setup can handle a 393 with a tiny 206 cam? Are you talking about being able to idle and stuff? I don't think that's going to be a problem at all. I mean, if it worked on my low compression 302 with a 224 cam on it, you're going to be fine with that. Richard just talked about don't overfill the oil pan on oil changes. Yeah. I like less oil in the LSs when we run them on the dyno, and particularly the big blocks. Compound turbos are definitely worth it on diesels. Yeah, if you're trying to get high pressure ratios, and that's a good application, I think, for them. With compound turbos, you can get a ridiculous high pressure. Yep. Compound turbos are also worth it on small engines, where the small turbo helps the low and mid range. It was beneficial on the 1-liter Sprint motor because we put a turbo that was too big on it. I can't remember. I think that the compound, I was running 3 turbos. I was running the stock turbo. I was running a Volkswagen 1.8T turbo. And then I also have what I remember is a GT20 Garrett turbo. And both the little Volkswagen turbo, which kind of surprised me, and the Garrett turbo were a lot softer than the factory turbo that was on the Sprint motor. And so when I compounded them, because we got to the limit of the factory turbo, and when we compounded them, it made things a lot better. Would ceramic coated stock manifolds make any difference with temperatures under boost? Yeah, I think that you could, in the localized area, I think in the engine compartment, in the localized area, you could help with heat by doing that. Also by wrapping them and stuff and shielding those. That's done on like road race, particularly endurance cars, a lot. Is it really necessary to run a high pressure pump on a turbo LS? This has been a debate for a long time. 20 PS of idle. What should pressure be above? Your high pressure pump only has 20 psi at idle. Have you ever tested dry sump systems on any of the LSs? I've never run a dry sump on an LS. They have run at West Tech. They have, from other engine builders, they have run dry sumps like they've run the factory LS7 stuff a lot there, because there are lots of LS7 base motors that they've run there that have that factory setup. And then also some like dedicated race motors that had dry sumps, but none of my stuff is that. It has that or has ever been tested with that. With the slant stick, I always wanted to get the Dutra duals and get a GT45 turbo with a 110 cam, 110 LSA cam. So that's the cam that you want. Those are the specs, is just the LSA. What weight oil did you use on the big block LS builds? Probably still a 530. We may have used a 520 on it. I'd have to go back and look. I don't remember putting high volume or high pressure pumps on either the 468 or the 495. We got a Peterbilt with compound turbos, 50 pounds of boost and stock trim. Have I ever tried ceramic coated exhaust? You mean ceramic coating the outside of it, like a header and stuff? We've done that, but not like in the exhaust of the head, though. James, I like the idea of not necessarily running a high pressure one, but a high volume pump on a turbo application, particularly a twin setup, because you have so much more oil going through you have more oil going through the turbos. And I would be more concerned about that at idle, but I don't know that that's a thing because I I haven't tested it in the real world to see if I don't ever remember measuring like idle oil pressure on the dyno and then putting the turbo on there and then measuring idle oil pressure again. I do know when we put the turbo on there that the oil pressure does go down. My grandma had a 1975 Dodge van with a slant 6 in it. Timu has pretty good deals on stainless steel headers. They even got turbo headers running half of one on a 351 Windsor and GT45. It's a copy of the On3 T4 Fox body header, but for $180, that's a good deal. I couldn't respond yesterday, but acupuncture is hugely beneficial. I highly recommend it. You might not get the full benefit from it on your first few sessions because you're tense. I would imagine so. I don't really have back pain or any of that stuff. I am lucky, I guess. Shadow ultra high RPM small block Chevys are back in now on YouTube. Almost impossible to find a perfect OEM core for that. If you want a high RPM motor like that, you're probably money ahead buying one of those used cup motors. Although I'm certain that you have to change the bearing clearances and maybe the ring packages on those to get them to work. And maybe the camshaft too. I don't know, to get them to be able to drive around. Dan might know. I don't remember a regular small block Chevy making anywhere near 1,000 horsepower in cup. The stock type blocks were only good for a little over 600. They would rip the main webbing out of the block. We've made more than 1,000 horsepower with 4-bolt blocks, but not NA. It's a lot easier with boost. Would you use stock manifolds or even cheap Shorty headers to feed a turbo? 84%. That's what I like. So I like my weekenders. I've had 6 or 7 commercials already. Yeah, I'm just making the money. Or YouTube's making the money. SB2 had an aggressive cam. We've run a couple of Chevy and Dodge cup motors at West Tech, but I think that they have to, warm them up, and it would not be I think guys were interested in making like drift engines out of them, but not daily driver and cup motor. I don't think really go together. Most everyone's broke now, especially no-name national guys. $500 plus or so, find a core, then Dreamway. A core for what? For the block? Make an LS hot side turbo setup for sale on your store. Sell it cheap. Jimmy and I were talking about that because I don't want to do kits. The problem with kits is that what does it fit? What does it doesn't fit. This one has AC, this one doesn't. I don't want to go through all that. But we were talking about maybe doing manifolds or something to give people just the basics of stuff. What's the largest cam you'd run a 393 that runs on the A9L? Well, I don't know. We ran the 224 cam in a 302, which means that you could run something bigger in a 393. Do we need to do a training upgrade? No, you don't. You just need the cam and springs and lifters because you need more fuel. The camshaft is going to make so much more power that stock injectors are not going to be big enough. Gen 3 LS oil passages, is there just the cam retaining passage and the same on the back of the engine? Or is there more that was improved later? It's actually not the oil passage that they did. It's communication tunnels between the different groups of cylinders. Because that's what they're trying to cure, because it's a deep skirted block. And so you get pumping losses. And if you look at scavenge stages for race engines, they have one for each one of those, and it gets rid of those pumping losses, which can create problems with oil drain and oil pressure. And so they did that first on the LS6 block, and then they incorporated that in the Gen 4 blocks. I'll have to see that I watched a video about a person that knows the SB2 very well. To sell a knockoff of the hooker one that cross feeds. Yeah, I think we would do it differently than the hooker one. I like the hooker one because it works for a lot of different applications. Stock GM rockers are good. I agree. I normally recommend upgrades just as a maintenance item because let's face it, a lot of these have 100, 200, 300,000 miles on them. How big on injectors? We have some 1,000cc stuff. But we have, if you're just going to be NA, the 52s that we have work good. ...2004 Chevy Suburban 598. 5G, that's been board 20. I don't know what let's see. David, I don't know the camshaft. The number that I need for the camshaft is the intake duration. The exhaust duration would be good, and the LSA would be good. The lift doesn't really tell me very much. Scat rods and crank, magnet charger 1.9, shorty headers, 3.4 pulley on it. Now has a 3.0 dyno at 540 wheel horsepower. That's good. That's good power. What is my opinion of BTR rockers? I think that they're really good. But again, like we talk about on stuff like we were talking about at the beginning of this discussion with the exhaust manifolds, are you curing a problem? Is what you're doing. Like I don't doubt at all that the BTR rockers are better than the stock ones. But are you at a point where that rocker swap is necessary? I don't see a lot of that. Let's make one. I'm in the market to buy it. Well, then you should just make yourself one, right? If you can do it. We run at least 5 scavenging stages and pull 20 inches of crankcase vacuum. That's a lot. What size injector you recommend for a low buck truck on a stock 5.3? Jack, we have them up on at my store. We have basically an NA injector and then a boosted injector, and we're going to replace the boosted injector that we have there now because I think it's an 80 pounder, and we're gonna do the 1,000. But the 1,000s are more money, which is why I might keep the 80s also, because the 80s will do a lot for a lot of people on boosted stuff. They're just not enough for a guy wanting to run E85. But I get a lot of guys on here that don't have E85 available, so they're going to run. I mean, most people are running pump gas, So an 80-pound injector with boost on pump gas, you can go a long way with that. Yes, I need to buy or make a crossover pipe. Tim, you can't do it. There are lots of single side like Y section where you just use a stock manifold on the other side. There are lots of those available already, I think. After hearing about bush and trunnions wearing, I bought 16 GM rockers, eventually replaced the bushings and the BTR rockers with trunnion upgrade when I finally do an all out for the 5.7. Question: is there anything you'd recommend doing, checking with brand new push rods before installing them? Yeah, it might surprise you if you can find really small pipe cleaners and run it through there. Or what I do, I haven't ever done that. I've seen people do that, and sometimes they find debris in it. What I do is I take brake clean with the little hose it has on it, and I put brake clean in there, and I spray into the hole and try to clean everything that might be there. Sometimes there's nothing in there. But I like doing that because whenever I do push rods, I always look up at all of them and make sure that I can see through all the holes. And then I clean them that way. And then I put them in oil and then I put them in. Douglas, the store is richardholdenerperformance.com. Tim Webb already answered that, except there's no caps, though. It's all lowercase because I'm not that important. Danny, are you talking about the exhaust manifolds? I spelled it wrong. That happens. I get that all the time. I get that all the time with my email address too. I would use whatever's cheap and available, but honestly, after hearing you talk about easily stock converts and has plenty of plug wire clearance, stock just sounds easy. One of the problems with using stock exhaust manifolds in the vehicle with all the accessories on it, that's difficult. And it works really well in the dyno because I don't have any of that stuff on there. So I can make my Y pipe. It just works. But it's hard to package that around AC and power steering and all that in the vehicle. So just flipping the stock exhaust manifolds around doesn't work. Most guys cut the ends off and then weld a V-band or whatever they're going to use, and then in a different angle or a different direction, and then make that work. That's honestly a lot of work for a lot of guys. Can't do that. So if we could come up with something, what I wanted to come up with, what Jimmy and I were talking about, is use the stock exhaust manifold on one side, route the exhaust under the motor into a Y section into the other manifold, and then mount the turbo up from the front of that one. And I think that would work. I guess the most to the point question is, can the early block realistically have the same oiling upgrades? It can't. It can't have those communication tunnels unless you're willing to drill through the block. AC and power steering are not a priority. Okay. Sounds perfect. Send me a pre-market turbo system to try out. All right. And I guess I could, because it's probably time for me to fix all of the missing exhaust bolts that have broken off on the, I know I have at least 2 on the truck, so that we could put the one on the other side. And since I've already dropped the exhaust on it when we were running the blower thing on the dyno to see if to make sure the cats weren't clogged, but they weren't. So yeah, we could do an exhaust manifold. I'll bet that it's already out there. Turbo T4 manifold for Silverado Sierra turbocharged Vortec. That's exactly. It's on eBay. It's $394. That's exactly what I would want to offer. And somebody already has that. Boom. Problem solved. Summit Racing Pro LS turbo manifolds. Let's see what we got. See what we got going on. Yeah, that's not. Passenger side. Does that have 2 provisions for wastegates, or is it, or does that have universal turbo manifolds, single or dual mount design? The hooker manifolds are only $561. That's pretty inexpensive. Hooker Blackheart. Interesting. Cheap at twice the price. That's right. After which modification should you upgrade injectors? Anything that makes you make more power than your current fuel injectors will support. So 25-pound injectors on a truck application, on an LS truck application, will support, let's say, 400 horsepower. If you put a cam in it, like you put one of my cams in it, you're going to make more than 400 horsepower. And so you need an injector upgrade. If I purchase your low buck truck cam, what is everything else I would need to make the swap? We have a cam and spring package that you can buy, but that's it. And then if you need injectors, but you don't need push rods. The stock push rods normally work, but we also have push rod upgrades. Reading about windows in the block, I'm guessing the big holes in the webbing. People claiming that helps, but that just sounds like a crankcase volume. But it's more than just volume, though, because you're moving pressure from one low pressure side to a high pressure side, and it's able to do that while the thing is running. It's a thing. It's a real thing. It was enough of a thing that World Products or whoever did that block thought enough of it that they cast a block to do it. They look like junk and need 2 wastegates. That's one problem with older high mileage LSs and other modern platforms is broken off 8mm bolt. Yeah, on that 4.8, that 148 that I got, we had, I want to say all of them were broken off. Look up on 3 turbo headers. I have looked at their stuff. I mean, online I have. Cast iron single turbo. That's $83 compatible for a Silverado. That's pretty cheap. I don't think you're going to get cheaper than that. That's a max speeding one. Boom. There you have it right there. I should get those guys to send me one of these. And it's a V-band. It doesn't look like it's perfect, but I'm not looking for Mr. Right. I'm looking for Mr. Right now. Cheap no-name ones are great. Just have them cleaned up, a little bit of flashing. What are you going to do about the trans? Because after countless agonizing about the Turbo 400 with reverse manual valve body, seems to be the most long-term affordable deal. I'm using 7.4 push rods, but I think anything taller than Truck Norris, cam, or if block has been decked or it's a good measure. Why are you recommending push rods for something taller than, I don't understand, taller than those cams? I don't know what you mean there. My 76 Cutlass came stock with a crossover pipe, and one of the exhaust manifolds have an intake and exhaust flange. Would be perfect for a single turbo. A lot of the transverse V6s are like that. the 3800s, a perfect example, the supercharged 3800s, the L76s and the L32s, and the NA versions of those, and the 3400s and 3100s. We've done turbos off of those. We just welded a flange over to the crossover pipe and then capped the other side. And it worked just fine. Cheap log manifolds for turbos. I'm looking to make 1,000 horsepower on a 6-liter LS. Which of your cams would you choose? Well, either one of the cams will easily do that. So that's not a cam thing. That's not a cam question. The question is the turbo. You just need a turbo that's sized for that. And then also, what else do you want? Do you want to be able to use a, stock converter stall speed? How do you want the idle quality to be? How do you want the drivability to be? And do you want to try to improve boost response? Normally, I recommend the low buck truck camshaft for that, because you could make 2,000 horsepower with it, but it's maybe not the cam I would use for that. But it's just a matter of how much boost you're going to run, and do you have the turbos to support that? Because the camshaft is going to make, like, on a 6-liter, it's going to make, I don't know, 460, 470, or whatever it makes. So you're at 14 pounds, you're going to be at 900 plus very easily. And so 1,000 happens not very far after that. Gonna sell your reputation with the company. With what company, Tim? With max speeding? We wouldn't put holes in the webbing, but we would separate each main webbing using the oil pan. So there are 4 scavenge stages. That's the way that the race guys would do it, Dan, is that they didn't have balancing between the different sections of the block, but they made sure that they didn't have any, they made sure that they had vacuum, and they compartmentalized it basically. As far as the scavenging goes, they made individual 2-cylinder motors, and it works good. Do you sell pre-programmed tunes for the low buck trucks? I don't. We don't deal with tunes, but the guys that James Short over at Short Tuning probably has stuff. I love that so many small engines are basically lubricated with windage. Harley Davidson was splash oiling. There were a lot of splash oiling motors. For LS engines, you need to pump up the lifter to set preload. Yes, but that's usually not an issue. But once you have set upon the ideal pushrod length, if the lifter's not pumped up after that, it doesn't make any difference, because it will pump up when you start it. Maybe that even be better and easier. Dual turbos would mean less routing. Maybe just pulling inner fenders would allow enough room. My cheap turbo log manifold looks like the Holly one. Just cleaned up the flashing. They also weld easy. Oh, cool. Richard, do you think it'd be better to do a divided T3 or T4 or T3 single, or twin T22s on 300? Well, twins would look a lot cooler, but there's not going to be a better one of those. You just size the turbo for whatever you're trying to get done. Have you ever used Haltech? I have one. I have one of the Rebels, and I've been there when the guys at Brian Tooley, they have Haltech that they use for the tuning there, and they've done a lot of stuff with that. I'm getting ready to put one on an LS, but it works really good. I mean, I obviously watched James do that a bunch when he was tuning, when I was back at doing the dyno stuff with the guys at BTR. Let's see. Probably a bit big, but a $200 Turbo Next is good. You're gonna put a T66 on there? Those can make good power. Do you have a hot rod that I drive? I have the Silverado that I have is all stock. The Omni GLH just got completely all redone. It's now a GLHS. A 5-liter Mustang original owner, and I have a 71 240Z and I think it's a 94 Geo Metro that we put the little AMR supercharger on. Like to try a Mega Squirt. We ran the MS3 Pro on the 4200 and it worked good. I was just checking out the Rebel Haltech because of what we discussed earlier today. That's a good idea. Not an LS, but I have a Haltech unit on my supercharged Toyota V6. Nice. Is that a TRD deal on the supercharger? Just looking at a combo like this yesterday for my boat. I read my mind. Yeah. I feel so neglected. Why are you feeling neglected, Break? Have you ever tested small cube high compression LS, and what sort of power do you think it can make? I don't know what you mean. Do you mean something smaller than a 4.8? Jordan, 8 to 10 seconds at most when starting an engine for the first time for oil pressure to show. If you don't have it by 10 seconds, shut it off. Check your oil gallery. Yeah, we on the engine dyno, we pressurize the oiling system. We cap everything and pressurize it with a air nozzle till we get about 2 psi. And then with the plugs out, we spin the motor over with the starter, and it usually picks the oil up right away. That's a lot easier to do on the dyno than it is in the vehicle, but it could be done on the vehicle. You could pressurize it and put a little gauge on it. My engine hasn't had any oil in it since it was machined 2 years ago, other than to prevent rust. New lifters are empty still. I don't have an oil pan yet, but is there a way to set preload? Can you see the lifters? You can feel them because they'll be pushed up to the top by the spring. So the oil pressure isn't the only thing that keeps them at the top. So usually you can feel when they move. So if you have a good feel for that, you can feel when they start moving, when zero lash occurs. And then if you're bolting them down, if this is on an LS, you can still feel that. I mean, but I don't know how sensitive you are to that and how much experience you have with that. I can set lash on them or set preload on them on lifters that don't have any oil in them. But I've been doing it a long time, though. I have a pretty good feel for it. Lunchbox, I do have shirts up for sale. Yep. Like this one. Wrong cam one. In red and blue. Currently using HB tuners on my 98 S10. Keep it simple and go Holly. Panda Express coming back. I'm gonna run a turbo on it. And then I have the Holly 1-barrel deal, or 1-barrel or 2-barrel deal. Power through 6,000 RPM possible through a single GT45. Yeah, yeah. The turbo is not going to care about RPM. The RPM is going to be a function of the other things you're doing on the motor. And then whether or not the turbo keeps up is going to be a function of what boost you're trying to run versus what the NA power output is. But if you have a motor that makes peak power at 6,000, the turbo will still be there as long as it can support the power level. So you don't think a divided GT35 would be more or less responsive than a pair of GT25s? I don't have any idea on that motor. I don't know what the GT25s will do. I don't have any idea. I don't think that well, it's 300 inches, so maybe it will have good torque, but it just doesn't make hardly any power. I think both of those are over turbo for that application, are more turbo than you need. But if it's a T3 GT35, I think it probably will be fine. I really love the Z's. Were amazing how they looked and handled. Mine had a 383 Chevy on it. Nice. Did it have an R200 in it? I let my lifter soak in oil for a day. I soak the lifters too before I do the engine assembly. I'm running an LQ4 706 BTR truck Norris cam 750 VRS carb. Don't have many guys running turbos because the boat stays at 5600 full load for 25 minutes. There you go. That carburetor works good though. I'm debating on a Pimp X ECU. I like the name. What would ideal air fuel on 91 gas up to 12 psi on a small block Ford blow through? It needs to be somewhere in the 11s. Draw through for the Panda. Yeah, for the AMR will be a draw through, and the turbo will also be a draw through. Is K1 4340 ARP 2000 an adequate mid-tier rod? For what power level are you trying to do? But the answer is going to be yes. I've never dealt with building automotive engines. 350 trans on the Z and slightly narrow. Oh, and a narrow 9-inch. Okay. The 9-inch cures the R180 problem then. I bought this motor in 2011, turbos in 15, ROS in 2020. Blake, you could blow through the VRS, just enclose it in an enclosure. But otherwise, I don't know. I don't know enough about the internals of that carburetor. Do you watch Neo Mustang small block Ford builds? I don't. Richard, whatever happened to the 320 at small block Ford you did for your Mustang way back? I actually sold that long ago to the guys at HP Performance. That was the A4 block motor. That made over 1,000 horsepower. I would do things differently now because you learn stuff. So we're gonna close out our poll at 86%. We got one more minute. Official 1 minute warning. There. We're live. It's all the way live. Do you think twin GT20s? I think that the GT20s that I had, or the one that I had, was like a 200 or 250 horsepower turbo. What's your favorite cheap fun vehicle? It depends on what I'm trying to do. Like I really like the Sprint Turbo because we've set land speed records in it. But there's lots of good things out there. Miatas are amazing to drive on the track. There's lots of cool stuff. Does anyone have any experience with a Stinger Pimp X ECU? That's a great name. It's much better than the Pimp 9. Although Pimp 9 is good too. That's like gangster as well, huh? That's what I want my street name to be. Because because I've got so much street cred. Good times, good times. Lots of guys build pull motors based on your information. Thank you. Studio gangster. That's it. Yeah. I'm, yep. My cell phone service is from Poser Mobile. It's Scarlet Pimpernel. Since you're a road race guy, Richard, you ever think of doing one lap of America? I haven't actually thought about doing that. Small chloride performance stock RPM truck. Is your plan a turbo Silverado? I'm just curious to see. No, I'm not doing that. Big Bang 6-liter and a Miata. Yeah. No, I would just use the truck to make sure stuff fit. Just put it on there, and just all we have to do really is make sure that the exhaust goes there and that the turbo goes there and all that. That would be fine. You think a platform for 3D printed cams could be developed? My small engine has a steel shaft with plastic lobes and gear. I don't see why they couldn't do that given what they're making already. Now, maybe it would have to be 3D printed and then, I don't know, induction hardened and something maybe. No brakes. I thought you were swapping to a 5-speed manual. Twin GT20s would be fine for 400 horsepower. Well, the 400 and the 500 are a big difference. That's a big swing for when you're talking about 400 horsepower turbos. I think that they might be that big. You just have to go on. If you actually have GT20s and they actually are precision or not precision, if they're Garrett turbos, you can go look on and see what they flow and see what they'll support. Yeah, Richard, you'll have to rap for us. It'd take a lot of drinks, I think, for that to happen. Oh, I hear one of the doggies. He's gonna come tell me it's time for me to come down there. Dude, you've been online too long. Come on, it's time to go. And on that note, guess what? It is time because it's been more than a minute. I'll see you guys all tomorrow. Tim, drinks.